Welcome to Weird Rap Podcast number 11. I'm your host, The Mole. I'm proud to present another action-packed episode. We got Afrofuturist rap godfather Mike Ladd of the Infesticons. We got Kool Keith back with Weird Rap Horoscopes. We got a haiku from Rhys Langston, and even more. First, I want to tell you about a ton of new music recommendations. The first half of this year, we didn't have a whole lot of music that I found particularly interesting, but we've been bombarded with a deluge in the past several months of what I would call great weird rap. There's a lot, so I'm going to try to go quick. Air credits, Believe That You're Here. This is an EP by Chicago-based MC Show You Suck and producer Steve Rydell of the Hood Internet. I think it's a really expertly crafted, moody, and varied piece of work, and I recommend it.
One problem, I only got one problem. I'm strapped to this bomb, stressed to the gods. Pray for a cold, pray for an arm. Pray of the day, day of the dead. Pick up the grave, and a grenade. Loose of the grip, DNA spray. They told me not to party outside. First time I heard it at a party outside. Never trust too wise. Party outside. First time I heard it at a party outside.
Dos Monos have released 2 EPs this year. Dos Siki Second Season is an excellent EP, and then Lardarello is their latest. Dos Monos is the Japanese rap trio with always unpredictable and interesting production. One of my favorites.
We're the fearless babies まだ平気以上の闇耐性持ち生まれついて即マスクするマス We never gonna run how to shout.
Moormother has released Black Encyclopedia of the Air. You never know what you're going to get with Moormother. She'll go from rap to spoken word to singing to harsh noise or ambient music. But this is probably my favorite release of hers. It's more rhythmic and rap-based vocals with like lo-fi, jazzy, almost Sun Ra-esque beats. There's a lot of guest vocalists that create a nice balance of voices, including Elusive, Logi, Pink Sifu, etc.
Lost my father in 16, let the mothers pray. So much bullshit in the air had to fall away. Now I'm back at it, let the mothers say block, block, block. Lick shot, shot, shots. Like block, 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 block. Lick a shot, lick a shot, lick a shot, lick a shot. Hey, water don't get wet like this.
And speaking of Moormother, any fans of hers should also know about Zonal. That's her project with The Bug. Their album Wrecked came out a couple years ago and kind of flew under the radar, but that's also one of my favorite Moormother projects. Nyege Nyege Tapes has consistently been putting out really interesting music, mostly from Africa. They just released Sounds of Pamoja. That's a Tanzanian compilation produced by Duke. The genre is called Singeli, which is basically this intricate, fast-paced, kind of punk rock take on rap music. Features a bunch of different MCs. It's certainly not for most people, but I think it's awesome. Nyege Nyege also recently released the album Na Zala Zala by Ray Sapiens and the Congo Techno Ensemble, which is rap, singing, and chanting over kind of unique, syncopated electronic production. Really unlike anything I've heard before.
Nimekosa hela sasa za kwenda shuleni, sijui wapi nimetoka, sijui wapi ninakwenda, sijui wapi nitaanzia, sijui wapi nitaishia.
Youngman and Celestiphone put out A Year of Octobers about a month or two ago. Youngman is MC Paul Barman's less verbose alter ego. Celestiphone did what I would call just masterfully crafted vinyl sample-based production, using a lot of garage and psych rock sources. You can tell a lot of care went into the production of this album. And I would also recommend it to non-Paul Barman fans because I know he's a bit divisive. A lot of people can't handle his approach to rap, but his Youngman alter ego is kind of more normal sounding.
Red leaf in the jam jar. Yo, before you season a food, you season a pan. We believe in the truth, then believe in a man. Sit a man down, that's his reason to stand. Unless you got guests, and I got a feast plan. The turntable is set, for radio met with blank stares. Bang scared as we shred, tear up angel of dead. Damn shame people do work for Lucifer. We top 10 most wanted at a New York music store.
Andrew Mbaruk has released, he's always releasing lots of new music, but a month or so ago he released Andra Mbalimbali, which I think is one of his best works. It's one of my favorites, at least. I think it's a great balance of voices with the several guest MCs that he features on it. It's got real bare bones, underproduced nature like most of his self-released stuff. But in this case, I think it works really well. As always, Andrew's lyrics are super literate and funny with a laid-back delivery that I find pretty soothing.
For I'm a rapper as Snoop Dogg or Jay-Z. His adventure madcap, taking a battle axe to this sapid rap, till I steal my rhymes back, dying at last in the final act of To Pimp a Naiad, mindful of...
Injury Reserve is a band that I never really got that into them. I felt like they had a lot of songs that were cool and a lot that didn't really appeal to me, as a little too traditional sounding for my taste. But their new album, By the Time I Get to Phoenix, really comes out of left field, I think. I was really surprised by how bizarre it is. Super messy, atmospheric, kind of eclectic rap and fucked up R&B. Supposedly the recently departed group member Groggs in the studio during the recording of this kept insisting that they, quote, make some weird shit, and that is certainly what they did.
Smoke don't clear. I got my hands tied with plenty more ahead. What was your pants? We got some shit right here. Strap up your own boots, all up here for me. Do what you want, put some pepper in your step. I tried to move mountain with just many men. I tried to move mountain, but that ain't really it. Do what you want.
Pan Amsterdam released the PA&J Sandwich EP. His vibe kind of reminds me of an updated take on early Farside and De La Soul. But it has beautifully arranged instrumentals featuring himself on trumpet, and his whole catalog is worth checking out.
They fell into the sea eventually. Ask Jimmy, overjoyed like Stevie, unemployed so you don't see me. Roll up your sleeve when you play with my bass reef. Nat loving you to death. Private? At ease.
Aaron Cartier, Smile Season, is a new album with really just inanely loud, blown out beats and equally wild, high energy vocals. Super simplistic, vapid lyrics, but it's really more about the vibe than the meaning or the poetry. Good music to bash your head against a wall to. And Rob Sonic, who I interviewed on the very first episode of Weird Rap Podcast, has a new album, Latrinalia. I think it's his best album. It's my favorite, at least. It continues to evolve his delivery, From the production to the lyrics, I just think it's really finely crafted.
For your blues, see the clovers glued in the side where they live, and the daisies just get pushed up by the dyes in your drip, so the tinier Sims can tool up the toes. If you smell me, don't you tell me that's a cue for cologne. It's rules of the road in my part of the pine. My other name is Mud, my other car is your mom's. There's a scar in my teeth, but so is my...
A couple more albums that just came out that I'm still processing, but I really am enjoying what I've been hearing are The Birth of Lone Sword by Lungs, who is an MC I'm just hearing about. I think he has a pretty unique delivery, great lyrics, and his album features like a who's who of the NYC Underground's finest MCs, in my opinion. That's out on Purple Tape Pedigree. Shout out to Gang.
Sword draped the tongues, the armor face, the armies touch the earth and blow the horsemen off their feet. Repeat the mantras after me. Swear to bird trees, defeat death. All opposing factions and disease. Repeat the steps you practice till you weep. Abandon all attachments, except to save your synergy to stop perfecting. 10,000 lifetimes perceive the threats of downs from growth pressure.
Curly Castro has a new album, Little Robert Hutton, which is sounding really cool. This came out on Backwoods Studios. It features Billy Woods, Sketch 185, Breeze Bruin, and a bunch of others.
Don't just play in your head. You'll be mumbling to self, close mouth, don't get fed. When I seen you in the alley, man, I thought you was dead. The Clark wept, say your place in the Shadow Quartet. But you couldn't channel Bird and you walked away wet. Never wanted you to fall, brother, just to relent. And that midget spun us wrong, told you from the beginning. Kept that club mode better.
Now, I want to mention one more album that came out last year, but I think a lot of people didn't hear about it. This album oddly was released under two different artist names and album titles, but you'll find it as Micah 9 Discoveries from the Ninth Dimension or Flavor Wolf Ninth Dimension. And that version includes an extra track, so that is the one I would recommend. But this is a very noisy, experimental album. This is the most out there, weird Micah 9 album I've ever heard, and I think it's really cool.
Digital inventions, pivotal expressions, chemical questions, critical at the pinnacle presence, simple suggestions for finicky adolescence, visuals from the essence to digital desktops, freeway rest stops, and partake in the best crops, and elliptical circumambulations of this rock that seems to stop.
Links to all the albums I just mentioned will be in the show notes at weird.substack.com. That's also where I post articles and stuff from time to time. I think the most recent one was on fan-made Death Grips remixes and remakes. Worth checking out, I think. And now it's time for
Hip-Hop Haikus.
With, in my opinion, one of the greatest rap poets of all time, Rhys Langston.
Cyborg minstrelsy besets EMP blast shield, and my mouth moves stern.
Once again, that was Rhys Langston. I highly recommend his latest single that just came out, produced by Black Milk.
This is my change of address phone, yeah. I would love to walk the block without making machinima. With a teeth retainer gas when pulls bodies out bath plug. And rising up my yellow, red, and RNA. Tarpaulin is consistencies, malefactor setting. Fluorescence becomes mismatched cosmetics. Dysphoria, Rosanto, Westphora. The body feels the bag of the...
And his recent album, Stalin Bollywood, is really great. Interesting fusion of genres. And I also recommend the Droog EP. That's all available at rhyslangston.bandcamp.com. That's RHYSLANGSTON.bandcamp.com. And this leads me to our next segment. Are you wealthy? Do you have extra funds and you love unusual rap music? Well, maybe you should support Rhys Langston, because I think it's a crime that he is a substitute teacher and not able to survive at this point on his art. I think he's a genius, and you can go support him at patreon.com/Rhys Langston. You can get exclusive writings, audio, and visual art from him. Also, if you're wealthy, you could invest in an idea I have. I want to make weird rap breakfast cereal. Imagine this. Imagine we have the Humpty Hump edition. Maybe we call them Hump Lumps. Maybe we got Kool Keith Krispies with blue flower marshmallows. These would be cool, like, collector's item cereals, but it would probably take a good little investment of money to make it happen properly. Anyway, speaking of Kool Keith, here he is.
Yeah. It's the weird rap horoscopes of Kool Keith. Check your horoscope. Aries, beware a man named Toby. Taurus, get an enema. Geminis, do 739 jumping jacks. Cancers, have a baby and name it Miami J. Leos, hijack a cruise ship. Virgos, take up bullfighting. Libras, coat yourself in chicken grease. Scorpios, go to the nearest lake and put your elbow in the water for 10 minutes. Sagittarius, whisper your secret wish into the darkness. Capricorns, give a massage to a crocodile. Aquarius, you are a gold zebra. Pisces, bleach your armpits.
And now it's time for our segment called Did You Know? Did you know that Weird Rap is now selling officially licensed Kool Keith t-shirts? We got this beautiful full-color design of Kool Keith with octopus tentacles and stuff in a variety of shirt colors. Those are available at WeirdRap.com. That is also where you'll find links to the Weird Rap Bandcamp, Spotify playlist, YouTube channel, Mixcloud page, social medias, and even more. Now, it's time for our feature presentation. This poet, rapper, and hip-hop producer emerged in the late 90s with his album Easy Listening for Armageddon. He further established himself with the Welcome to the After Future and Infesticons albums around the turn of the century, when he was closely associated with NYC's burgeoning scene of artists including Anti-Pop Consortium, Company Flow, Rob Sonic, Saul Williams, etc. I consider him a godfather of weird rap. We spoke long and deep about his journey from childhood till now. So here he is, Mike Ladd.
My father had passed away when I was 1. My mom was an academic, and we grew up sort of on the middle class side of Cambridge. And I would spend time between there and my aunt's house, right? Because my mother was working a great deal. And my aunt's house was very poor. So all my cousins that I grew up with were living a very different existence than I was living. And they were aware of that. So I became very aware of class difference at a very young age, at like 4.
Yeah.
So I was always bouncing in and out of these different little worlds. And you got to remember, Boston in the 1970s, we're talking about the 1970s. It was a very different place.
Yeah.
I was very segregated, both racially and in terms of class. And then my mom was very interested in raising a sort of an exceptional or special kid. I think about that now because I raised my kids just to be regular. Like, just be you. You know?
Yeah.
And my mom was always sort of like, I mean, given, all right, this is the early 70s, coming out of the civil rights movement, coming out of everything else. It was just sort of like, you have to be something exceptional. And it's not just about excellence, but different. And so I ended up with weird stuff like Tintin comics and Asterix and Obelix when I should have been reading Marvel. I just love this one book called And If the People Could Fly, which was Black American children's stories. So I would sort of show up with that to school, like, you guys should check this out. And I was like, man, it's not Batman. So that may have just sort of been a place that made me more sensitive and then more interested in outsiders myself.
Yeah.
Because that's where it really gets into it, is that I then I mean, I was a dick when I was in like junior high school and high school because I was that guy who would be into a certain musician, and then as soon as everybody else got into him, I didn't like him anymore. That's a dick move, but I was that guy, And so, it's like so when I was listening to Bob Marley because my mom was listening to it. And this is the '80s, and then everyone else was like, "Oh, I like Bob Marley." And fuck Bob Marley. I like, Bob Marley's whack. I like guitar, sure. Or like when the Clash did Combat Rock, I was like, "Oh, they sold out." It's like terrible, but it also meant that I was always digging. I was always looking for different stuff, looking for stuff that was out of the ordinary. I remember even in the '80s, just trying to find cassette tapes with weird rap. Like that's what I was looking for already.
Yeah.
Man, and I wish I could remember some of the people I found because I'd find these weird ass tapes, from people from like Texas or, from anywhere. And it was all cassettes. I got to dig them up. They're someplace. And I do remember, and just in terms of, outside of stuff, I had this best friend in college, his brother Jeremy. And one time he turned and looked at me, he's like, "Man, I've never met anybody like you." And frankly, it was a lonely feeling. I was like, thanks, but you're my best friend. Like I got nobody, I mean, that's just this tiny anecdote that I think actually may be voluminous in that it's simultaneously valorous and lonely.
Totally.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Going back a little bit to how you were a part of two different worlds growing up, I would assume that as an adult, you've kind of integrated those two worlds somehow. But as you're growing up, did you find that you're vacillating towards one side or the other, rebelling against one family and then the other way maybe? Or how did that manifest being stretched between those two worlds?
The only way it really manifested to my own detriment was my academic rebellion. I didn't do very well in school.
Yeah.
So don't recommend that strategy. But I had a lot of trouble as a student. And, for my mother, education obviously was liberation. She came from a very modest situation in DC. And I had a certain amount of learning disabilities and this, that, and the other thing. And so, yeah, my rebellion really articulated its way there. And I did spend a lot of time that I probably could have spent elsewhere bouncing between the two worlds and making sure I was always still in contact with one world and the other.
Yeah.
So I definitely didn't choose one over the other, but I did a lot of bouncing back and forth, just maintaining relationships and both. That I don't regret, obviously. But it did take extra time, so I was doing extra work. But of course, a lot of people do that. It's not a unique situation by any stretch of the imagination, of course. I mean, let alone the sort of universal code switching that's understood within the Black American experience and the amount of, the vast amount of Black Americans who are jumping through different code realms all the time and different class realms all the time. But that's also something that translates to a great deal of American families.
Sure. So like, I keep wanting to label things. I want to try to label you as an outsider, and then I have all these distinctions within different kinds of outsiders that I've been thinking about. And I know that many artists, true artists, I think would resist being labeled. I could totally identify with that. I know that you and people like Ram LZ have rejected the label of Afrofuturism. You titled your album Welcome to the Afterfuture, which in my understanding was kind of a commentary or a way to move through or past the term Afrofuturism.
Yep. Well, it was before people were really saying Afrofuturism.
Right.
I was just commenting basically on futurists.
Yeah.
But I have this whole thing about it. Like, so post-futurism is a thing, like it's a literary term had already been around since I think the late 70s or early 80s, which makes sense because the futurists were in the 30s.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, so part of it was a joke to that. Like, okay, well, there's the post-futurists and, and that that was one of those things that I had to research. This is before Google, and I was just reading some. I think I was like obsessed with the book We or some shit, and I was like, "Come on, man, we've already got to be in a post-futurist society," and of course we were. So then I was like, but then there's the after future, and there's a whole theory around that, which is based on. It's not that complicated, but it's basically that science fiction can't compete with what's actually happening. And for me, that there was this schism. I wrote this whole thing, the After Future Manifesto, which is terribly written and doesn't make any sense, needs to be rewritten. But essentially, it just says that the point of departure, like when we kicked into the after future, was, 97, when the Hale comet went by? Yeah. And there was the Heaven's Gate cult, and they all caught a ride on that comet. There was one brother who was in the Heaven's Gate cult, and that was Nichelle Nichols' brother. Nichelle Nichols, who was Captain Uhuru on Star Trek.
Oh, right.
So, like, at that point, reality fused with science fiction in such a seamless way. And then all these scientists say that the comet, the tail of the Halley's Comet, was actually a little bit longer after it passed Earth. So for all we know, Uhuru's brother caught a ride on Hale's Comet. And who knows if one day they'll get picked up by the Enterprise. We don't know. But so for me, the after future kind of starts there, where all science fiction becomes irrelevant.
Welcome to the after future. Hale, Bob, Shabab is the icon for the apex of suburbia. Prefab, post-war culture, cultivating into Heaven's Gate. Could be blurring your vision. If I bet my dick, I won't win wisdom. And what's more middle class than death by applesauce? The Grim Reapers, Lucky Charms in a box. Still ain't nobody shot Goldilocks, but perhaps that's life when it's led in the after future. Michael Jackson was accidentally.
And then, once you get to the Trump era, that's all it is. It's after future all day long. Frank Miller can't keep up with that shit.
Yeah. I mean, what's next? We've been in the after future for 24 years then, by your count. Is there anything after the after future, you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been waiting. I keep waiting for some big cultural thing to happen that hasn't. Well, the one I want to happen is happening. But I think we're already in a world war that is mostly being waged over intellectual property and basically our brains. The theater of operations is our brains, our ideas.
Yeah.
Well, just what everyone's talking about, the social engineering. It's not mind control. So there's something happening there that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I keep kind of harping on the labeling thing, because even in just talking about the after future, we're trying to label. And then part of me is always kind of wondering, is this a white tendency? Is this like a colonizer mentality that wants to
yes,
scientifically categorize?
Yes, it is, Jonah. Yes, you colonizer, you. It is. To label stuff? Actually, yeah. I mean, honestly, you nailed it. That's certainly where the tradition comes from. I mean, the whole thing of labeling started, when the first explorers start coming over, quote unquote explorers, start coming to the Americas and going to Africa, they bring these quote unquote scientists with them.
Yeah.
Who start, and they weren't quote unquote, they were genuine scientists of the epic. You know what I'm saying? But the main thing they would do is label everything. There was this insane cataloging of everything they came across, except for humans, of course. But that was kind of the whole spin. It was like, all right, we're just going to catalog everything. We're going to publish these massive tomes back in Europe so people will read through these things and not pose questions like, who are you brutalizing while you're over there getting these resources that are very interesting to us? Because, contrary to popular belief, the average, European citizen didn't want that to happen. And you see that later when you read something like King Leopold's Ghost, and King Leopold has to be on this whole PR spin. He's basically in a spin battle with this Irish journalist trying to cover up what's going on in the Congo, because the average Belgian citizen would be appalled if they knew it happened. Anyway, okay. So in terms of labeling, yeah. At the same time, sure, labels are been using marketing. I mean, we're living in a Western-based sort of capitalist economy, and music is part of that. You can't pretend that it isn't. But, of course, when I started, I put out my first record in 96. That was a huge dilemma. What are you going to call this stuff?
Yeah.
Especially the first record.
Sure.
Trip Hop was some brand new shit. No one really heard that. Portishead's record, I don't think it even come out yet. Tricky's had. So Trip Hop was an option. But, the label were lovely people, but they're freaking out. Like, oh my God, do we call it trip hop? Do we call it hip hop? Do we call it... At that point, you wouldn't have called it hip hop, frankly. Because hip hop was still... You couldn't even... If you sang on a song, like in my crew, and like De La Soul fans, and De La Soul was calling R&B rhythm and bullshit. If you sang on a song, you were in trouble. PM Dawn got punched in the face for singing. You know what I'm saying? By KRS-One of all people. So like, things were much more stringent. And there was already that issue of labels then. I think it annoyed me at the time. And then I just stopped paying attention to labels, especially now where they're meaningless. I mean, my kids listen to everything.
Totally.
Yeah, like everybody does. So finally that whole, I really do feel liberated from the whole label idea. Sure, okay, hip hop comes up as a genre. I hate the term spoken word. What am I going to do though? It's everywhere. I mean, if I label myself, I say I'm a poet and a hip hop producer, right? Poetry, I like the term poet because it's all encompassing. For me, hip hop or rap, it's a form, right? Like I could be writing a sestina. I could be a formalist, and kind of what I think of myself when I'm writing hip hop is as a formalist. I could be writing sonnets. I could be writing sestinas. Here I'm writing 16s. And so I like the term poet just because it's the most general.
Yeah.
Homer was a fucking poet. Sundiata was a poet. And, these people were telling stories. So I don't mind that label, but I get labeled everything else. Fucking dick, asshole.
I guess no one likes to be labeled too narrowly or mislabeled, but defending my tendency to label the white devil's advocate in me wants to say that
with a key, you sissy.
Isn't language itself a process of labeling?
Sure. I mean, how much time you want to spend on this, Joda?
I don't know. Sorry.
No, I mean, a lot of languages meanings are fluid too. So
you gotta strike a balance.
Yeah, and I think, Black American tradition from the beginning has been to always flip the meaning of labels for our own survival. What slang is, and it started as a life and death situation, and it's and the same thing with Spanish, French, and Italian. Those are vernaculars.
Yeah,
they were in rebellion to the imperial Latin that was being used.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we've got to find another way to work. And part of that is just all of a sudden, flipping the meanings of labels.
Yeah.
So changing meaning is lifeblood. It's survival.
Yeah, that's what they call living languages, I guess. And all languages that are current, I guess, are gradually changing.
Yeah, in order to stay alive. Well, it's tricky because when you get into the thing about like living languages and dead languages, that's tricky because sometimes when things move too far, the language dies. You know what I mean? Like the way English has consumed certain languages. I like to think that, the reason I love things like Creole and Pidgin and Patois is the way they took the sort of imperial language and then twisted around into something else, and then it creates something new. But in that process, other languages do die. So it's, it's like nature. It's there's no good or evil. It's just tragedy and survival. All
right, let's get into your work a little bit. You have a huge catalog under various names. I think I listened to everything, maybe in the last 3 weeks.
Thank you.
It's hard to track it all down, but it's great. Yeah. Like it's not to pull your chain or whatever, but it's beautiful stuff.
Thank you.
But in your opinion, what are some of your greatest works?
Man, unfortunately, it's still some of the oldest stuff. Welcome to the After Future. I really like that record.
Yeah.
And there's things I just remember. I remember when I finished it, and my friend DJ Preservation heard it, who was a phenomenal producer.
Yeah.
And we were all living together up in the Bronx. It was like me, Rob Sonic, DJ Preservation, Fred Ones at TME, this brother Omar Gartu. We're all living up in the North Bronx together. And we all moved up there because Freddie moved the studio up there. And I finished the record, and Preservation heard it. And just the look on his face was like, yo, you really did something. Like, I just knew. It was one of those things you just, when it was done, I knew it was good.
West of our future, so where's my floating car? My utopia, my Mars colonies, like it's supposed to be.
Yeah, 2029, watching the apostle on TV. Thanking Jesus for this lifestyle.
And this is that whole period. I really liked everything I made between, especially from 99 to 2004. I was just banging shit out.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I really like all of it. The stuff I'm doing now, I'm trying to get back to that sound or just to that feeling. Pretty much since 2015 on, I've been mostly working on other people's projects, just keeping food on the table. And I've been lucky, that I've been able to just keep saying yes when the phone rings. It's not always my favorite type of music, but I haven't done anything where I really feel like I've made an ass of myself, and I certainly haven't sold out. You're not hearing me do something with Justin Bieber that I'm going to regret later. I've been able to keep the family comfortable. Part of that's also because my wife's a homeowner. That makes a big difference, and should not be ignored from the equation. But I've been able to sort of be the primary breadwinner outside of that. But that's meant saying yes to tons of shit, just to keep it moving. And COVID was kind of a godsend because it has allowed me to finally get back to working on my own music again.
Yeah.
So I got two things. One's almost done, The Exilians, which is with the Senegalese sister named Ty. And Juice Aleem, who's the best MC to ever come out of the UK, period.
Awesome.
A dear friend and a hero, just in the way he lives life and the way he works,
So it's the three of you on vocals and you're producing it, or what?
Yeah. And Ty produces too. She makes some crazy ass beats. She does, she has this ill Senegalese approach to it.
Nice. And what's the other one? What's the other project?
This is a solo record that's... all the beats are done, and I'm just, for some reason, it's taking me a long time to write all the text. Once I get my text done, then I'll see if, who I'm going to ask to be on it, if I'm going to ask people or whatever. I've never been a big, when it comes to getting guests on shit, it's always just been friends.
Yes.
I've never been comfortable, sort of reaching out to somebody,
Right.
Been like, yo, hey, Drake, what's going on? My name's Mike.
It's been cool seeing you make appearances, though, on some recent artists' works that I wouldn't have expected. I didn't realize that you and Rap Ferreira were connected. How did the two of you get linked up?
I'd heard of him. Actually, my man Creature was like, yo, this guy's talking about you, but in a good way. Mm-hmm. And I was in a weird space. This was several years ago where I wasn't really, and I sort of go in and out. I really cut out from social media, I pull out for a while and I go back in. And I was in a place where I really pulled out. And he reached out to me years ago, and I just didn't, I wasn't in the right space where I basically wasn't even returning emails. And I fucked up because I really, really liked his work. And then one day he was in Philly, and I was with Priest from Antipop.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yo, let's go see Rap Ferreira. He was doing it as Milo at the time. So we went and saw him, and we got to meet each other. And then he got at me. And he sent me, it was actually kind of bringing me back to life in a way. I don't know, I was in a strange place, I think, just from doing so many guesting things. But honestly, France is not the most inspiring place musically for me at all. You know, I'm here because I love my wife and my kids.
Yeah.
And because the life is easy. But in terms of creating, god damn. Anyway, so I was in a weird spot because of that. It's like no fucking inspiration. You know, like you walk down the street here, you don't hear music. You know what I'm saying? You know, in New York, you have to like dig a hole in the sewer and bury yourself in stone to not know what the 5 songs that are making money in the world are.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You just know. Let alone all the other music, let alone the reggaeton that's coming through with the salsa, merengue, the, you know, what's happening in dance hall. You know it just by walking down the street. And that doesn't happen here. And so that's been hard, especially like living in outer space. So then eventually I hooked up with Milo, and that felt a lot better because he sent me these tracks, and I was like, oh shit, I can rap over every single one of these, you know. No one's trying to like send me their version of Steve Coleman and be like, yo, can you do this? And, you know, 5/7, and then in 3 bars it's gonna switch to 7/8, you know.
Do you find it a challenge to rap on weird time signatures like that?
Well, it depends what you're doing. You know, like the way I do it is I'm always sort of, I just ride it in a certain way. That makes it pretty easy. Yeah. Depends how you land. Like, you know, if you like sort of throw a Billy Wood style type of thing on there of like, you know, tracks like Blade Runner, like that style.
Shell shock, got a lot from Atlanta to Woodstock, Boston to Washington. New York's just downtown like a city one. Guns are like jewelry, you're carrying tomfoolery. All soothing me, while elder information does loop me loops, pump through veins like Sorazine and hula hoops. Must stay awake.
It fits on anything because there's so many syllables. Or like, I got that one track called The Animus, like Thoroughbred Nickelbot on number 1 street. There's something going in my juice, but I'm still squeezing processing vernacular. There's so many syllables that you can make them land any way you want, you know. Or if you go more of like a sort of Billy Woods, more Mother style, like where it's just like, you know, theoreticals on the Red Room, too many Basquiats in the house, not enough chakras, you know, then like it's modular, so it's easy. And you just ride with it. So like that's no problem. But then there's people like there's this Senegalese rapper named Gaston.
Yeah.
Who works with Steve Lehman. And he's rapping in Wolof. Okay, so that's cheating because there's so many goddamn syllables in Wolof. It's crazy.
Right.
And but it's ill because he'll hit every he's like playing off the fucking hi-hat on like in like 7/5, then going to 7/8, then going back to 7/5, while Steve is like playing in 3/4 or some shit. And I was like, you know, I was like, yeah, I can rock anytime I want. And then I saw Gaston do it, and I was like, holy shit. When I met him in the airport because I was playing with Vijay at the same festival, at some festival in Norway. And I was like, yeah, man, hey, how you doing? I heard a lot about you. So who's your favorite rapper in Senegal? And he was like, me. So I was like, okay, you know, normal like rapper chats. Okay, you cool. Then I saw the show and I was like, you're right. He's amazing.
Have there been any other recent rappers that have appealed to you, that have surprised you or jumped out at you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been completely fanboying out, obviously, on More Mother for a while. And Billy Woods is like, I'm just everything Billy Woods touches, I'm with it. And it just feels like there's a couple of people. I mean, you know, Milo, Billy Woods, More Mother, Open Mike Eagle. I'm a huge fan, and also I feel kind of like, all right, I built a door frame and left. You know, not me by myself, obviously. I mean, people that you have on this show, but like me, Antipop, Warco, you know, those guys didn't leave. But you know, it's like I was like, oh wow, okay, I built this door frame. And I was like, I should build a door in the house, and I just broke out. You know what I'm saying? So, of course, people went through that door.
Right.
But I just love what they do. I like Dean Spencer, too. And then Serpent with Feet, obviously, now huge. But, like, when they did the Four Ether song, I was like, oh, I was so mad.
Yeah,
I was so mad when I heard I was like, God damn it, I'm gonna do that, but I can't. There's no way in hell I could do that song. And then the second to last Arm & Hammer record, I just had on heavy rotate. That got me through COVID.
Yeah.
But there's like a lot of like, I like that guy Mike. He's great.
All right. Yeah.
And there's so many MCs like that I don't know. Like, thank you for that link to that dude,
Rhys Langston.
But like, yeah, I mean, like, there's just so many people I don't know. I mean, Mortal Technique is dope. You know, I've known forever. I haven't seen Immortal since probably the 90s. Like, yeah, Mike, you think you're hard, right? You ain't shit. What the fuck you would say? There's like certain cats like Immortal and C. Ray's Walls who are like always in battle mode. Like they're always ready to battle. Like sometimes C. Ray's Walls will just sort of battle rap at you to say hello. Right. But what's that shirt supposed to be? Blue like a bitch dying tanning at the sea. You know, whatever you would say. And you'd be like, hi, C. Ray's, good to see you. But that's why they're amazing. And I just, you know, one thing I've been a fan of is like watching Immortal Technique's whole career. I just love it. And you know, like what he's made.
New American century, false flag terrorism controlling you mentally. The gospel in the hands of people with no empathy. A mixture of dangerous social chemistry between law enforcement and a military entity. Cameras on the corner of every corner you facing, testing out a future Gestapo on immigration, power, consolidation, information.
And just in terms of like people who've sort of really achieved certain things that I felt were important to achieve. I agree with most of what I know that Immortal talks about, but I'll probably disagree with him at one point. That's fine. You know, that's not I just, and then the other person who totally did that, and Ka came out of nowhere for me, but like we had the same record engineer, and it's Scotty Hard, who you should do a piece on Scotty.
I did for the New Kingdom episode.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's from, but Scotty deserves like a whole
I know, yeah.
thing.
He's awesome.
But he was like, oh man, you gotta hear this guy's Ka. He's the best rapper I've ever worked with. And I was like, oh man, really? I'm in here trying to record something. He's like, nah, you gotta hear him. And I heard him, I was like, I quit. I'm done.
Cops got us under microscope to make sure we see cells. Know my first vitamin was iron, but I just want B12. Ain't dwell by the seashore, but we're sure to see shells. To protect the clique, it's best to admit details. Not board games to get money. Pursuit wasn't at all trivial. One true for heavy loot, every group was formidable. If they pay for a body, ain't get nothing short of critical. Many in the rest could attest to what we endure living through. Either with a belt or a bullet.
I think I said this earlier, you know, rap for me, it's just another poetic form, right?
Yeah.
And time will tell who makes it in the canon of the, you know, the great poets of the early 21st century. 200 years from now, we'll know who survived that. A lot of them will be rappers. A lot of people who were poets who think they're going to be in that anthology won't be in there, and a bunch of rappers will. But I bet you any editor who's worth his salt is going to have Ka in there.
Yeah, it's pretty undeniable. I think he's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a few things that I wanted to do myself, and people did it, and I'm just thrilled that the mission has been accomplished. One was like the perfect fusion of poetry and hip hop in a way. And for me, Ka comes super close to that. In the same way that like Death Grip's first record is probably the best fusion of punk rock and hip hop for me. You know, since Death Grips, he set a template. You know, you can say maybe horror has done, you know, gotten in there. And that was something that I've been consciously working at, you know, playing in punk bands, and you're like, when you hear like Wild Out Day, I think is a very good attempt at it. You know, I'm proud of some of the sort of like punk rock, you know, even the other thing was the Infesticons was like a punk rock approach to hip hop, you know, in a certain regard. And I definitely took that sort of dirty punk rock aesthetic. But for me, Wild Out Day is probably my favorite fusion at that. And I feel like I got really close.
It's 5 o'clock, so the car stops, saw these nuts like pralines, cocoa and tan. I'm just at 155 on the D, being a workforce fair, better with little lace. Wild out day, motherfucker, wild out day. This is wild out day.
And again, that's using, like, there's Bollywood samples in there. And so it's like, because Bollywood works good with punk rock. But when Death Grips came out, I was like, okay, that's done. You know, that one, you know, that first record. It's perfect.
Yeah, I agree.
Guillotine's a perfect song. My wife loves Guillotine.
It goes, it goes, it goes, it goes, it goes, it goes. Guillotine! Sit in the dark and ponder how I'm fit to make the bottom fall to the floor, and they all fall down. Yeah. It goes, it goes, it goes, it goes, it goes, it goes. Yeah. Out of the shadows, barrage of witch tongue, cobra spit over apocalypse.
Like, that song works for, like, my 12-year-old daughter, my 16-year-old son who listens mostly to pop, as you know from going on my Spotify.
Have you followed all the weird fan-made iterations of Death Grip stuff? Like all the remixes and edits and weird covers? And
no.
Man, I got to send you some links. Just this morning, someone posted in the Weird Rap Facebook group, someone redid the entire ex-military album with just their voice.
With all that dies to become unborn. I close my eyes and seize it. I clench my fists and beat it. I light my torch and burn it. I am the beast I worship. God is watching. I am the beast I worship.
And just there's all kinds of weird Death Grips remakes. Like there's the Every Other Beat Is Missing edits where it's just Death Grip songs, but every other beat is edited out, so it's these weird mutant versions of their music.
So I don't get to walk down the street in New York and know what's banging on the radio there, but I do have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old.
Right.
So I listen to what all they get through. And that's crazy because they'll also have crazy-ass French MCs. French pop I can't stand. It really just, I break out in hives. Like I literally have hives right now with French pop. But then there's some like hip-hop, yeah, it's fucking crazy.
So I don't know if you know this, but on Spotify, if you're Facebook friends, you can see what all your Facebook friends are listening to. And I see what your account is listening to sometimes. And I've been like, that has to be his children using his account. Is that really him?
Hilarious. Yeah. Yeah, that's all my kids. It must be the worst shit in the world on that thing. That's funny.
I've been like, wow, he's really keeping his ear to the street. Well, you mentioned just a little bit ago, like making financial ends meet. And that reminded me of something I heard you mention before in an interview talking about artistic liberty versus economic modesty, I think is how you put it. You talked about having modest living standards as a way to have more freedom as an artist, which is something you kind of decided early on in your career. And that's something that I resonate with, and I just wondered if you could talk about that decision and that kind of outlook a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you don't have to do it that way. My heroes, obviously, a lot of them managed to do both. Like, you look at someone like Questlove. God damn, dude's a monster. He's doing phenomenal work, all 2,000% integrity. Just gets better and better, and he's making $1 bazillion. Not bazillion, but he's healthy. Yeah. Or you look at someone like, Dave Chappelle. So it's not that like you have to be broke to maintain your integrity at all.
Right. But it is.
So that's an important preface.
I mean, it's pretty rare though that you are successful as an artist. And if you're not going to sell out, it requires a certain amount of luck and connections and personality.
Well, and also staying focused.
Right.
Right. And that's what's different in terms of like, I've been able to try all kinds of different things.
Yeah.
Because I didn't stick to one thing.
Right.
I mean, like, let's take something like LP, for example. L just boom, he just hammered it. Brilliant. I love that dude, man. But like since we used to hang out, you know, he would just hammer it. He knew exactly what he wanted, and he just stayed the fucking course.
Yeah.
And so I mean, it's like, okay, you know, he did these collaborations, but he was always him. He never stopped being him. And then the thing with Killer Mike just landed perfectly. But like those two dudes, in terms of like people I know personally who done really well, I can't think of two people that deserve it more. You know, just in terms of like sticking to their guns, sticking to their integrity, never changing who they are at all. And they do it. But at the same time, they did one thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Mike did Mike, L did L. And it took 20 years. And then it fused. So yeah, I got to do a whole bunch of different stuff because I felt like it. But because it wasn't one specific product, yeah, it's harder to make money. Or you choose the modesty route in a certain way. But it was just whatever. Yeah, I'm not choosing anything. It's just harder to make money. You know, I like changing gears. I like trying different stuff. So like the whole marketing mode of just like, this is the brand, even if you're not thinking about marketing, you know, even if it's just Sonic, and like MF Doom, you know, more than the mask gimmick or anything else, he just had a solid Sonic brand and he just banged shit out. You know, it was like, I forget what year it is, where he put out like 4 records in a year. It's like boom, 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 boom. And then he didn't stop. And I've always, that's my favorite path to success thing that I like. You know, not that I did it, but I like that version.
Yeah. And obviously it's really fulfilling as an artist to be able to dip your toe into all different sorts of styles and forms of art and different names for yourself. But I wonder, do you have any regrets about the way you did it?
That's a good question. You know, it's funny, you know, because I no, like I think I should. You know what I'm saying?
But I mean, you're in a good place, so I mean, why would you regret it?
That's kind of it. Are there some projects that I've done, especially since I moved here, that I wouldn't want to pop up on YouTube, or that, like, you know, I'm not mad that there's only like 17 likes on it? Yeah, there's plenty of stuff like that. That's part of just trying different stuff. You know, part of an experimentation is failure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things I love about Prince is that not every song is amazing. He tried everything. He didn't care. And he'll put it out. There's another example of someone like did whatever they wanted to do and did well, you know. Yeah, I don't really regret it. I sometimes I wish I just, you know, once I'd done those first Mike Ladd records, just stuck to doing that. Boom, 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 boom. But I don't know if that would have, who knows what that would have done anything. You know, regret, you know, it's funny. Every time I try and regret, it doesn't happen. But it's weird. I guess I feel pretty all right about that. But like, I'll look back and I'm like, yeah, you know, and then when I really think of something I should be regretting, I don't. I mean, there's, you know, as a parent, there's certain, you know, you never want to give advice out of regret, but I do sometimes. And one of the things I tell my kids that I never did is run to your heroes.
Mm.
And don't spend a lot of time hating. I spent a lot of time defining what I was doing by what I didn't like instead of just being a fan, you know?
Talk more about running to your heroes, though. What do you mean by that?
Just like if there's someone who you think is great, for example, I was a huge Ishmael Reed fan, and he really influenced how I write.
He's the mumbo jumbo guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that book's awesome.
I could have sent him an email and, you know, sent him my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wrote a letter once to Kurt Vonnegut in high school. I never had the nerve to send it. Finally, my mom found it. Years later, she sent it, and I get a reply. These giants, a lot of them are happy to hear from you.
Yeah.
So I tell my kids, run to your heroes. Run to your heroes and don't hate, relate. but like, don't underestimate the power of being a fan.
Sure. So let's get into this Infesticons. That's how I was introduced to you back in just right after it came out, I think. I was like a kleptomaniac music consumer at the time. I would just steal a lot of music from record stores. And I think I just saw probably LP's name on the back or something like that and grabbed it.
So you stole my record instead of downloading it for free.
Yeah.
Because like at that point, it was like you either robbing the physical copy or you're ripping it. Because it was like the days of Deezer and shit.
Well, I did both, actually. I would steal them and then copy them and then sell them back to Amoeba for credit and then buy more stuff at Amoeba. Continue the cycle that way.
Right.
But man, it was such an awesome experience hearing that for the first time. It totally blew me away. And to this day, cool. I think it still stands as like a pillar of avant-garde rap or whatever you want to call it.
Thank you.
You know, and I listened also to the second and third part of the trilogy, the Majesticons and the second Infesticons album. And at the time, I recall like not getting them. Like, you know, they weren't what I expected. And I wasn't super, you know, happy with what I was hearing at first. And
people with the Majesticons, people were straight up furious. They were like cats who wanted to fight. I mean, really? We played in Chicago once. And, you know, it was a joke. You know what I mean? I mean, the Infesticons came out because basically Will Ashton at Big Dada, which was Ninja Tune, was like, hey, I like what you do. I want to do a record with you. And, you know, and so Funkadelic, you know, so George Clinton just being my hero since I was 15, I was like, oh, this is my chance to do Funkadelic and Parliament or some shit like that. You know, just the idea of having aliases made perfect sense to me because of Funkadelic and Parliament.
Right.
And so I was like, you know, this is a no-brainer. And of course, George Clinton was incredibly focused and I'm not. Anyway, so like so I was like, cool, we'll do the Infesticons. And actually, the title came out because I was writing some rap and I came up with the term Majesticons, but I knew I wasn't a Majesticon. I was living with LP at the time, and I was just like, "Yo, who would Majesticons fight?" And LP's like in his room, he's like, "Infesticons," and like goes back to working. and so that's how the title came. You know, it's LP's title, and. So I was like, perfect. Okay, Infesticons. And then that turned into a band. And I kind of wanted to do just sort of like get as close to a garage band with my production as possible. And, you know, like, you know, did everything on the MPC 3000, but just play as wildly, throw everything as wildly as I could in there. You know, I'd like literally like just sort of jump up in the air while I was hitting the pads to get those beats in and, you know, just trying to make it as loose and, you know, really like imagine that the MPC I was really imagining that the MPC 3000 was like 3 fucked up kids in their parents' garage. That's what I wanted the machine to sound like. And then and I can't remember, but I had like all these concepts in my head of what I wanted it to sound like. And this kid named Vasos, who's an amazing dude who like he's an incredible engineer. And he went off to business schools, like, fuck this music shit. I don't know where he is now. But he did an incredible job with that record. Yeah. But when he finished it, I hated it because it wasn't what I had in my head for some reason.
Right. You said it was a year before you listened to it again.
It was a year before I listened to it. I think basically like I wanted it to be, by that time I was obsessed with, you know, both Electric Mud and, you know, Howlin' Wolf hates this record, but hated his electric guitar too. Those were 2 chess records.
Okay.
That Charles Stepney had produced. You know, basically the Black Keys doesn't exist if it wasn't for Muddy Waters, Electric Mud.
To
treat your man, that I can love you, babe, until it's a crying shame.
In the Howlin' Wolf record called Howlin' Wolf Hates His Record.
Okay.
And I was obsessed with those two records. And I think I wanted it to sound like that. So I couldn't listen to it for a year. And then I was like driving and I put it on. I was like, this is fucking great. And to this day, man, what Vassos did with that record was great. I mean, there was already a lot of punch in it, but he just made it loud. It's a nice, loud record.
All out to get cheese like Dreamweaver. Ain't cops, ain't nothing but lost believers. Hiding out in the Bronx, camouflage and goatee in the season.
Nothing less. Nothing more.
God bless the Infesticons.
He was a great engineer. The other guy who worked on it, the other engineer who worked on it was Jeff Cordero, who became a good friend. And we'd actually lived together in Boston for a while. Unfortunately, he died of an aneurysm. But yeah, and then Bruce Grant, who's another great collaborator, friend of mine, who had a band called Huge Voodoo. He was the one running tape loops through stuff. We used to play together. Bruce was in all the early shows from like the very first 1996, because I actually made the first record, Easy Listening for Armageddon, with his best friend, Dennis Kelly, who's the engineer of that record. Mm. And, you know, when you're engineering a hip hop record, you're basically a co-producer, you know, a lot of times, I feel. So these guys cool. It's like Fred Ones was my major collaborator. He was the collaborator. Like when I was doing the Infesticons, he worked at the Majesticons. He co-produced that record. And Welcome to the After Future. Fred Ones co-produced that shit. Mm-hmm. Hands down. I mean, like, you know, he doesn't have that credit because I didn't get it at that time as the engineer. But like, there were just decisions that wouldn't have been made. Like, Fred was great because he was such a classic Bronx, born and bred. It was a perfect match because I'd have all these ideas, and then he'd always put the brakes on just at the right moment. Like, yeah, wait a minute, Mike. No one's going to get this shit if you do that. Just, you know, stick with that. You know, stick with this. Don't do that. And working with Fred Ones was when I worked the best, frankly. Working without him has been hard because he just had this way of putting the brakes on stuff and wouldn't let me get away with bullshit. But a lot of that I did at Ozone with Vassos. Cats would come in, you know, Mums came in. There's a bunch of people on that record. In the Bronx, it was like Rob Sonic was 3 floors above me. DJ Preservation, who ended up being Most Def's DJ and makes a lot of beats for Ka now.
Yeah.
He lived across the street. And then Fred lived downstairs and he had the studio. So there was like this awesome whole little creative colony that was making shit bubble. And each one of those people are like secret agents in, you know, underground hip hop all over the place, you know? Right. I mean, and then, you know, Orko would come through. He came through there once, I think. Who I love that dude, man. And then Akbar used to come through.
Were you involved with Amici too? Wasn't he like?
Yeah. So Amici was my manager. That's how I knew L.
Yeah.
I hooked up with Amici in like 1995.
Yeah, I want to interview him someday because that whole Ozone music kind of umbrella was super like important piece of, you know, the weird rap history, I think.
And Amici the reason why Amici is such an important figure, I think, just from a business level and just like from a management level, is his success is because he really stuck with one artist. And it was the first guy he signed, L.
Yeah.
And he stuck with L. L stuck with him through all this other stuff. You know, I mean, through Ozone, through Def Jux, they just stuck with each other for 20 odd years. And then finally it paid off for both of them in such a righteous way.
Yeah.
And then I mean, it's like a total testament just to like faith, you know, like like me and Meech really got along. And I love that dude to death. But I was a fucking disaster, you know. And Meech would try and do all these other artists, and he he gave his best, you know, while trying to juggle 9 things out of 30, but the one thing he did right was he stuck with his first artist. He stuck with L, and L stuck with him, and it worked, paid off.
Yeah.
So anyway, but going back to Infesticons, so that record was made at Ozone, which was Amichi's, studio.
My favorite song, or at least one of my favorites, probably my favorite, is the Cave Theme song.
With BMS.
Hope I land on Reddit, never looking behind. It's not the sun, I can only be the pain when it comes. I can't stand the rain till it's done.
So that's Jodorowsky, man. That's El Topo. That's all that is.
The samples?
Yeah, it's El Topo and probably Charles Stepney, big reverb drums. I can't remember. Yeah, I think it's like Howlin' Wolf drums, if I can remember. And then this woman Donna, who's singing the opera on it.
Right.
And Donna's amazing. I mean, Donna and BMS. And so BMS was a real good friend of L's. Mm-hmm. This is a super cool dude. And I don't know, it just sort of came together. But the main sample on there is a El Topo sample, slowed way down. And then there's another Bollywood thing. And there's Bollywood all over that record. But it's all chopped up and slowed down so that you don't know it's Bollywood. But there's like a whole bunch of...
What's your relationship with Bollywood stuff? Are you just like watching it, or why'd you sample it so much?
I went to high school in India for a year.
Oh, yeah.
And it was 1986, 87. And I'll never forget, we had to take a fucked up bus to get to the school, like one of these classic Indian buses. We're just in there with a bunch of people. And I was into punk rock at the time. I was like heavy, Minor Threat, Bad Brains, Fear, Murphy's Law, even. This is this Boston band, Gangrene. It was like things on my playlist, that, and then it was Funkadelic. It was like sort of bouncing between those. Yeah. But I definitely had this heavy punk rock taste at the time. And then this Bollywood track came blasting through a broken speaker, where like the woofer was just a fucked up one speaker hanging on a bus. And I was like, holy shit, this is the most fucked up punk rock shit I've ever heard in my life. And so I became obsessed with it from then. And like I came back from India with probably a crate full of Bollywood records.
Nice.
And that, that whole year really impacted me. Like it was probably the best year of my life.
So we've been talking about the sonic quality of Infesticons so far, but can you talk about the thematic concept and how it sort of evolved over the years throughout the trilogy?
Yeah. So, well, it started with, it was top dog, underdog, right? So at the time, underground hip hop versus top 40 hip hop was a big deal. One, because the concept of top 40 hip hop is really starting to dominate.
Yeah.
Which is funny because now, 20 years later, it's the only option, which is great and amazing. But at the time, it was a real big fight.
Yeah.
Guys were beefing about it. We were all concerned about not selling out. And also, I'm a terrible dresser. I can't dress up. It's been a beef with my mom since I was 4.
Uh-huh.
It was like, my mom's just a traditional black woman. It's like, dress well, son. You can't afford not to dress well. But I just dressed down, like much to my mother's chagrin. So, so the underground thing fit me, just give me a pair of camo pants and some back, and a sweatshirt.
Yeah.
I'm good. So it was the underground cats versus top 40. But there was a whole story. So the story is that there's this fictional character named Poof Nana who grew up in Yonkers, and he gets his smart friend in high school, like the same guy who would get to do his math tests and shit.
Yeah.
He gets him to build him a whole bunch of robots or cyborgs, basically, that will march down from Yonkers. Not like Yonkers was a nice place, but I don't know. That's where the story took place. To march down from Yonkers and turn all of the 5 boroughs into this giant nightclub. So basically, there'd be a velvet rope outside of your crib, and there'd be a bouncer there who's like, nah, you can't go out like that today. So like outside, almost like what happened with COVID, but like where like outside became the nightclub, and like inside was the free space. But as soon as you walked out the door, there was someone, checking to make sure you could actually go outside.
Yeah.
So that was what the cyborgs were programmed to do. And those cyborgs were Majesticons. And so the Infesticons lined up on Gun Hill Road, which is this big avenue that goes from west to east or east to west across the top of the Bronx.
Right.
And that's where they had the last stand,
Right.
So the Infesticons fought them off.
I also got to ask, was Poof Nana based on Puff Daddy?
What do you think? Yeah.
All right. I'm not that clever, I know. So
the Majesticons is Empire Strikes Back, right? So the Majesticons actually make it to New York, and they take over New York, and it's Beauty Party.
Call me Platinum Black. Platinum Black. Plenty be chilling with the Kennedys heavenly. Pleasure be, Kenny be, any given Saturday. Flattery, Academy patterns, we haberdashery of ecstasy. Kenny G, TT Boy and Melanie. Coco T, smoking with Stagger Lee. Rather Street Calorie, counting money with the family. Had to be.
And that was sort of my attempt at making a top 40 record, and it was a joke, but I'd also realized by that point that, it's like some of these top 40 cats, some of their production is 10 times more out and experimental than any underground shit,
Yeah.
Some of these guys are, they're really good at their fucking job. There's the 80% or whatever it is, 75% of top 40 shit that's just music made by committee. You know what I'm saying? Made by like a lot of people, because it's a lot of money and a lot of people's jobs and a lot of livelihoods on the line. But then there's that, 20% of just absolute sheer inspiration that just cuts through because it's just great,
And I just want to say real quick, like I was saying how I was kind of disappointed when I first heard it, because that was like 2004 when that came out?
2003, 2004. Yeah.
And I just wasn't ready for it. For whatever reason, it didn't meet my expectations, but I just listened to it again this last month, and I really love the sonic quality of the production. Like, it doesn't sound glitzy and overproduced like I remembered it. So I love it, and I would just encourage anyone else to, check that out, the Majesticons Beauty Party album. But go ahead.
Yeah, good looking. Yeah, it kind of aged well, I think. I mean, I bumped into most or Preservation, and one of them was like, yeah, I've been listening, Yasin Bey. And he was like, yeah, I've been listening to Majesticons on the regular. And that was, that was like just a few years ago. So
nice.
So it's held up in this funny way. But it's funny because like that tour, there were people who really dug the Infesticons, who when Majesticons came out, they were heated. They were just like, "What the fuck is this, man? You sold out." And we did a show, and it was a joke. Yeah. And like we did this show in Chicago, and I forget who exactly was there. I think it was like an anti-con kid or somebody. Anyway, we're sharing this show with someone, and these cats will definitely like, "This is bullshit, man. What happened to you? You were Infesticons, dude." Like they just were not getting it. And my man Creature was on tour with us. And some dude comes up to Creature after the show. He's pissing He's in the stalls pissing. And some dude comes up to him and is like, yo, let's battle. And Creature's like, I'm fucking taking a piss here. And one, if I can't, I've already had run-ins with the law. It's like, I'm not going to fuck with you. I'm not going to fuck this up. I don't need to get locked up. It's like, that's the last thing I need in my life. Anyway, I don't know what exactly happened, but then Kenny, who was our DJ at the time, a la Foos, British cat, he comes stumbling. He's Scottish, and he comes stumbling in backstage, and I'm chatting up somebody. And he said, hey, Mike, he's got this big smile on his face. He's like, you better go check out your boy outside. So I go outside, and it's like straight up out of like a Tom and Jerry cartoon. There's like this little underground hip hop kid running all around this giant empty venue. Like they're making like just circles, like, and Creature's like chasing them, like, with his dreads flying back in the sky. Like, I'm going to fucking kill you. And it turned into like this 30-second little rumble with these kids who were so upset that we had sold out.
Wow.
It was hilarious. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there would be like pop people, just like fans who would have never picked up a Infesticons record or a Mike Ladd record in their life, who dug that record. Like I remember like when we were, and it was a huge lesson for me, right? So we were on tour in Europe, and the way we would do the tour is it would be Majesticons for like the first 2/3 of the show. And then I'd be like, I can't take this anymore. I can't take it. This is not who I am. And I rip off my tie and shit and be like, we're the Infesticons. And then we kick into the Infesticons set.
Nice.
And so, one day we're playing, and you can imagine what Infesticon and Mike Ladd audiences were mostly like.
Sure. Bunch of dudes, backpacks.
Right. Exactly. So here we are doing Majesticon tours, and women start showing up. And then we're playing in Germany, like in like Bear or something. And all of a sudden there's like this group of like 6 really beautiful, well put together, just banging women, like right in front. I'm like, yeah. And they're dancing and loving it and everything. And I do that. I can't take this anymore. We're Infesticons. Within 30 seconds, I mean, like no more than 8 bars of the change, they were packed up and gone. Yeah. Just gone. No hard feelings, nothing against you, whoever the fuck you are, but we're done. It's just like out. And it was just a great representation of the market realities of music.
Yeah.
And what I love about music in general is that it's inherently pop. It's inherently sort of like, I can either take it or leave it, in a way that the visual arts aren't, that, that you can't sort of coddle it the way that gallery owners or, a lot of the visual arts, they go through a lot of hands.
Yeah.
And jazz does now, certainly contemporary modern music does. But your basic hip hop is still on a pop basis. It's still take it or leave it. I like it. I'm gonna buy it.
Right, because it's
there's
like,
something about it. It's like indie rock or anything else. It's still a pop music function. You don't go to the concert because you think underground hip hop is an important cultural event that needs your input. And even if you don't really understand the music, you think it's important to be there.
Most people don't. Yeah.
Right. It's changing, and it's going to change. It'll turn. Maybe it'll turn into the jazz of the time. But like, I'll give you an example of why I appreciated and why I still appreciate, why I love that pop basis. So like one time, me and Vijay, we were working with Creative Capital, which is like a arts funding program.
Okay.
And they had us go and play for a whole bunch of fundraisers. Some incredibly wealthy people who want to give money to the arts. And the type of work we're doing an opera, like I was writing the libretto, he was doing the music, and it was out there opera, about people of color in airports, or I think this one was Still Life of a Commentator, So like we show up to this apartment. It's one of these places. It's like an entire floor on right on Park Avenue. You ever been to an art gallery and it's like all installation art or like video art? It can be really interesting and great. You're like, this is amazing, but who would buy this and put it in their home? You know,
Right.
you scratch your head. Their apartment was full of that. You know, beautiful but impossible art. There's no place to sit, nothing like that. Anyway, and there's all these incredibly wealthy, well-meaning people there. And Vijay and I have to play like 3 songs. And so we did one piece. And immediately people start clapping, but they're kind of tentative. And then Philip Glass is there. And Philip Glass is an amazingly classy dude. So we finish. They're applauding quietly. Philip Glass steps out and shakes our hands. And immediately everyone's like, bravo! Bravo! Let's write some checks. Bravo!
Right.
And I was like, okay, I get it. I'm done. You know, I was just sort of like, I am always going to keep one foot in pop. You know, and some level or another, just because the exchange is clean. And that's what I loved about these women who showed up to the Majesticon show, and they were there, they were dancing, they were invested. If they had to buy shares, they would buy shares. As soon as they went to investigate, you know, as soon as they hit Infesticons, they're like, oh, let's go buy some Google. You know what I mean? They were just out. They were out. And it was literally, you could just tell it was just binary. You know, it wasn't, you know, there was no hard feelings. Just they were done.
All right, let's get back to Infesticons Part 3, Bedford Park.
Fight world, everybody out here playing the game. No surrender, no pretender, never playing the lane. Ain't a poor man feeling when they chasing the flame. Sand castles on dissolve in the fall of rain. Jump off the plane! Jump off the plane! Jump off the plane! Jump off the plane! Jump off the plane!
Yeah, so that first of all, that record was made in France. Okay, that's disclaimer.
Well, it's a great album. Why are you not happy with it?
No, I like it. I do like it, and it's good. I mean, the main thing that happened was, who cares at that point? Like 2010, the whole debate over underground and top 40 hip hop was dead. Nobody gave a shit.
Yeah.
You know, I waited too long to put the record out because I was making kids, you know, but I was still into the story. I mean, I'm still into the story. I got a comic book about one of the ancestors of the Infesticons.
Cool.
Like the story still floats around. But anyway, so the story in the trilogy ended up being that, like, you know, there was the military marching band for the Infesticons army that decided that they were going to avoid the war by just going to hide in a bunker. And so then the war happened. Everyone got obliterated and forgot about the war. And these guys had sort of just, you know, like the lone Japanese and American soldier on a Pacific island, you know, like they just stayed in the bunker and then came out of the bunker late. But they had all these sort of demo tapes that they'd made. And so that record is actually just the Infesticon Army marching band's demo tape, which is why it was received the way it was. It was a hard one for me because I was spoiled. Like I had gotten up to that record, I like on Pitchfork and shit. I was always getting 8s.
Yeah.
It was like a solid A- guy. You know, like my reviews would outstar friends of mine who might be better known, but I was still crushing them. And then that one was like, meh. And I agreed with the type of review that Pitchfork gave it. You know, I was like, well, it is a demo tape, you know, but there was a lot of people had big expectations for that record. The best part about that record was working with Jamal and Creature and Juice Aleem. Because those, like Creature and Juice, they had been the true blue Infesticons and Majesticons from the get. You know, like Creature hit the road with me when we did the Majesticons.
Yeah.
Juice saved the Infesticons tour. Like the first tour when we went out and did Europe, there wasn't enough money to bring people over from the States. And so it was like me, Fred Ones, Rob Sonic, and then Will Ashen from UK was like, yo, you should get this guy Juice Aleem from Gamma and New Flesh for Old to come with you. And me and Rob were so fucked up by the beginning of every show that Juice he would just save every show. Like Fred would just turn the shit on. Me and Rob would be like, fuck it with Infesticons! And like pour out a bunch of whiskey for everybody who couldn't be there because we couldn't afford to bring them over.
Yeah.
And then we drink the rest. So Juice saved that tour. And so what's cool about that record is just to work with Jamal of No Surrender, and Creature and Juice. Jamal, who's like, talk about someone who did everything before everybody else. It's crazy. Dude, Jamal rapped like Little John before there was Little John.
Really?
Probably 96. And he was already on that like, with the sun with a phone out. And like little short trap sentences.
Yeah.
He was doing that shit in 96, B. He was doing trap, Southern trap in 96. He was literally 20 years ahead of his time.
I want to get to the recent track you did with No Surrender. But before we do, did you have a certain musical concept going into Bedford Park, or did it just kind of come together naturally?
No, I mean, I think part of me wanted to give the whole Electric Mud and Howlin' Wolf thing one more shot.
Yeah.
Because like my first record was on a, homage to Charles Stepney. And then a bunch of cats actually, with some engineering skills and stuff, spent some time and really worked that shit out. Everyone from For Hero and then eventually to the Black Keys. And, by that time, 2010, Black Keys were all over the place. And I was like, man, these motherfuckers, let me try. And I didn't do it as good as they did. They're just like amazing. But
I don't know. For me, I thought it was great. And it really did strike me as like a blues rap album when I was re-listening to it recently.
Well, I might be dreaming all along, but you push me, baby. Got no fear of dying. If I'm not mistaken, it might be in your plan to leave me burning like the rest of the land.
I mean, this was my attempt. I mean, I still hang on to those Chess Records drums. There's just something about the reverb, the power, I still go back to those same drums.
When Bedford Park came out, I think it was touted as the final Infesticons chapter in the trilogy or whatever. Right. But now you mentioned a comic book, so the story is continuing in some way or another. Talk about post Bedford Park stuff.
Well, there's like I'm an origin story freak. I always got to know the origin story.
Yeah.
Like horror movies I couldn't give a fuck about a horror movie if I don't know why like the evil started. You know? Like if I'd missed the little statue part of The Exorcist, who cares? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't understand, I wouldn't have got the movie. Okay. Anyway, and so the Infesticons started. So I wrote who Infesticon Zero was. His mom was a professor in Timbuktu in the late 18th century, in the 1700s.
Okay.
And so he's like a faculty brat in Timbuktu. He was kind of a rebel. He's just like, I don't want to be here. And so he just sort of, he headed west. He headed towards the coast, which of course, if you're a young brother in West Africa, you really don't want to be just wandering around on your own, the height of the slave trade, right? So he gets picked up. Anyway, it was really inspired by Lauda Equiano, and then there's a couple of other figures from the late 18th century. Long story short, he ends up being taken as a slave, breaks out of that, befriends a sea captain, and at the Battle of Trafalgar, he's on a man of war, and in the chaos of that battle, takes over the man of war. And he and a bunch of freed slaves or freemen who were there, and some Irish and, just like random people of the 19th century who are struggling under the boot of, French and English royalty, steal this man of war. and they go around, they just cruise around the whole triangle trade, just raiding slave ships and making a name for themselves. You know, they like have this little hideout off of the Azores for a while. Anyway, they're all over the place. But he's basically like this seafaring rebel. And I wrote all this shit like way before Black Sails or any of that shit. So anyway, so that's the origin story. And then in 2013, I think I wrote this comic book, which I still have to finish, called The Indelible Stench of Mr. Four, which talks about Infesticon Zero's great grandson. Anyway, he's a kid around World War I, and he has this horrible accident in a chemical warfare experiment plant, and he becomes a serial killer. All this shit happens, but he ends up falling in love with Claude McKay in a way, who was, you know, a great writer, who of course now gets quoted in every goddamn movie, is because his poem "If We Must Die," people finally found. Anyway, so he follows Claude McKay to the Soviet Union in 1922 for like, I think it's like the second or third International Congress.
Okay.
And he meets Stalin. They're like the only two guys standing at this bar. Everyone else is wasted. All these NKVD guys and you know, Red Army troopers, and they're all passed out at this bar. And Stalin's at one end of the bar and our hero's at the other. And our hero can't get drunk because of this disease he has. And Stalin comes over to him. He's like, "Why are you still standing? You scare me. Nobody in this entire fucking country scares me. I will have to kill you one day." And he walks out. And our hero's like, "I need to work for that guy." So Infesticon number 4 is that guy. And so then it follows his story.
Wow. Did you ever publish the origin story?
No, the comic needs to be it needs a rewrite, man. And for some reason, it's really hard for me to rewrite stories. Like, I can get the first draft done.
Yeah.
You know, second, third, fourth draft drives me nuts. So I haven't done it. It's just sitting there waiting to be finished. I'll send it to you if you want.
I'd love to see it. Hey,
Okay.
Are you aware of the parallels between like your own life and Infesticon Zero? Son of an academic lady.
That part is, yeah. Rebel, son of an academic, hanging out at a university when he's bored. But after that, that's the end of the joke.
But maybe like getting involved in slavery is like your brief like drug addiction period.
Oh yeah. I mean, no, I'm more an Infesticon 4 guy. You know, of course, I'm in all of it. But no, the only conscious biographical reference was that he was like a faculty brat. I just like the idea of a faculty brat in Timbuktu in the 18th century.
Yeah. So earlier this year, to probably wrap up the Infesticon stuff, the Majestic Con song by No Surrender featuring you and Creaturenomics came out, and I was wondering, is this part of the Infesticon's canon, or is it not connected to the rest of the story?
It's loosely connected.
Trigonometry, subtract your whole colony. Mathematics, grammatics, no apology. Yeah.
Julian Bond wannabe prodigies. Pedagogical programmers of progressive anomalies infiltrating with the palace keys. I got a squad of Merkles.
Yeah, the Infesticons thing is way bigger than you can even imagine, dude.
I'm excited to see it.
There's a whole other portal that goes to an alternate universe.
Beautiful.
All I'm gonna say is Inch War.
Inch War.
Good night.
Awesome. All right. I just have a final question to attempt to bring our conversation full circle and tie a nice little bow on it. We started off talking about your early experience with feeling like an outsider, and I want to know, like, to what degree now do you feel like an outsider, if at all? Have you found a sort of tribe in any way, or do you still feel like a weirdo, or what?
I mean, I think we talked about this when we initially talked about being outsider, that one doesn't always feel like they're an outsider, right? You know, you sort of go in waves.
Yeah.
So like when I started doing hip hop in Boston, I was like, okay, this isn't going to work here. Because I was like rapping in 4/4 time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I wanted to rap in 3/4. Yeah. And this was 1992. And it was just like, speaking about another incredible group, Freestyle Fellowship. This was before I'd heard Freestyle Fellowship, and the sure shit Boston wasn't listening to Freestyle Fellowship. So I was trying to rap in all these odd times and just wanted to like do stuff with no choruses. And there was no place in Boston to do that really. So I ended up doing the spoken word scene. Luckily, I was also doing poetry because, what you don't want to be is the guy who got in the spoken word scene because they want to rap but can't rap. You know what I'm saying? That's like the worst. Yeah. And it wasn't that, but it was a place because I could rap, but it's just a place to like really experiment.
Yeah.
And I was already doing poetry, so that worked. And then I went to New York where you could have that. And all of a sudden you're not an outsider anymore because there's a whole bunch of people already stretching the limit. Right. Yeah. Then I'm in New York. And then, you want to start being able to express all of your different aspects, of your personage, of who you are as a Black person, right? Which means maybe you liked Bob Dylan and you understand the sheer Black wonderfulness of Odetta played in a field in Vermont. But you can't necessarily say that if you're trying to be from the hood or this, that, and the other thing. Then you go to London. So as soon as you're starting to feel like an outsider in New York, because you're not fully expressing whatever, or you're feeling a little bit different, you go to London and then you find that you can be an insider once again, right? And that there's always a community where one can be inside, as long as one is willing to sort of move, stay open, express themselves. And then once you want to express themselves, you usually find out you're not alone.
Yeah.
Now when I think about who I am, the type of stuff I like, the type of stuff that's influenced me, there's a million of me. They're writing screenplays, they work, they write for television, they're in the ad industry.
Yeah.
They're making music. And part of that's just age too. And just all of us sort of budding at the same time. So yeah, there were all these things that influenced me or I thought were unique when I was young. But it's because you're young. You haven't met enough people yet. You know what I'm saying? And also your common generation or that sort of common experience hasn't been able to really express itself yet.
Yeah.
Or self-expression hasn't bubbled up yet.
Or even know itself. Yeah.
Right. And of course, all that is before, social media. Who feels like an outsider or weirdo with social media when you can just bump into your other weirdos?
Yeah.
Am I a weirdo? Sure. Saul was talking to a mutual friend of ours, Bo Sia, and Bo's like, "What's up with Mike?" And Saul's like, "Mike's a weirdo." So, maybe I am.
Anything you want to leave our listeners with? The weird rap world?
Shout out to all the weird rappers out there, because I'm a fan. Huge shout out to people I miss. TME crew, Fred Ones, that whole Omar, Rob Sonic, Preservation, Kane and McCoy, Yazzie Divine. Just the whole Majesticons and Infesticons crew, Lisa Jesse Peterson, Son Singleton. It was just a gang of people. Life's Long. There's a lot of people I'd like to see again. And it's, I used to get to New York. And now I just, with COVID, all of a sudden, that's a wrap. Big shout out to Malik Crumpler and Saeed from Antipop, because they keep me going over here. I see them on a regular basis. Yeah, there's a million people I miss, though. It's funny, I got to actually do it. I don't know if I'll get around to doing it. But with so many people passing away, I want to just start posting, celebrating the people who are still here,
Yeah.
Latasha Nevada Diggs, Tony Medina, Takala, Jasiri. There were these great people
Asha Bendeli, some of them are doing great stuff now. Who we all started together. Some of them are famous. Sonia Song, I got in touch with Beans again. That was awesome. Talking to Beans.
Nice.
Have you done Beans yet?
Yeah, I did. I interviewed all the anti-pop guys. That was awesome.
Testies, the one I wonder. I thank you for doing this, by the way, with everybody.
Thank you, man.
Archivally, it's important. That's one thing I've learned. You go through all these stages, and you're like, man, who are all these people who jump in like journalists, and what are they doing? And they're parasitic. And then you realize that someone's got to archive it, and it's vital.
Yeah, well, it seems pretty disposable at this point. I often wonder, like, all this energy I'm putting into it, people are going to just listen once and throw it away. But, theoretically, it could last.
Yeah, as long as you got the tapes, someone, the Mojo magazine of 2080 will, dig them up and do a whole article on them. Let's hope.
All right. Well, thanks again, man. I'll be in touch.
I appreciate it, Jonah.
Likewise.
All
right. My talk with Mike actually went on for quite a while over the course of 2 different interviews. So the Patreon, for our Patreon bonus, we have a lengthy chunk of my talk with him where he details his journey through drugs and addiction. We'll also get a little deeper into his creative drives, some of his artistic struggles, career choices, and even more. You can get all that, plus past exclusive interviews with Anti-Pop Consortium, Skiz Fernando of Word Sound Recordings, New Kingdom and Scotty Hard, Big Just, Dose One, and many others for just $3. You can just sign up and then cancel immediately and get all of that stuff. Or you can keep supporting Weird Rap for $3 a month. Higher tiers also include participation in the Weird Rap discussion gang, stickers, t-shirts, etc. That's at patreon.com/weirdrap. And I want to thank from the bottom of my heart the 16 current Patreon subscribers. You're bringing me about $50 a month at the moment, and that means a lot to me. I mean, I can't survive on that, but I'm touched by your support. Speaking of Weird Rap's income, I am at the point where I think I could start getting advertisement. I really don't want to sully this podcast, which I hope to be an evergreen document. I don't want to have ads for mattresses and ball trimmers and stuff. What I would like to do is run ads for artists and music releases that I like. So I'm currently offering a dirt cheap rate of $75 to run a 30 to 60 second ad, only if I like your music. If I don't like it, the cost is $300. You can negotiate with me by emailing weirdrap3000@gmail.com. I hope you'll stay tuned. We got a lot of awesome stuff coming up in the future. We got an interview with Volume 10. We got one with Pedestrian and Gel. I'm supposed to interview Sensational. If you'd like to support Weird Rap, you can do that quickly, easily, and at no cost by going to weirdrap.com/rating and clicking around a bit. And till next time, know that you're not alone. As Mike Ladd suggested, there are lots of us weirdos out there. In order to find each other, we might need to dig. We might need to make our weirdness known to others. So be proud of your peculiarities, fly your freak flags, and make the world weirder.